The Midnight Train. Written by Ethan Blackwood and narrated by Benjamin Wilson. The soft rustling of the wind whispered through the desolate train station. The clock's hands inched closer to midnight, its constant ticking echoing throughout the empty platform. Gerald stood there, shivering in the cold air, his breath forming little puffs of vapor that disappeared into the night. He clutched his worn-out duffel bag, filled with his meager belongings, close to his chest. The small, grimy station was the last stop on his journey to start a new life in the city. If only he knew what awaited him on the midnight train. The sound of a distant train whistle broke the silence, sending a shiver down Gerald's spine. He could feel the anticipation building up inside him. It had been years since he'd left his hometown, trying to escape the memories of his past. His troubled childhood was plagued by his father's alcoholism and his mother's illness. The old house, once filled with laughter and love, had become a prison of despair. But tonight, Gerald was finally going to break free. The train emerged from the darkness, its powerful engine roaring like a beast in the night. It screeched to a halt, its rusty wheels grinding against the tracks. Gerald hesitated for a moment, a feeling of unease washing over him. There was something sinister about the train, its ancient, decrepit exterior seeming to hide secrets within its metal frame. But he shook off the feeling and stepped on board, the door creaking shut behind him. The interior of the train was dimly lit, the flickering overhead lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The rickety wooden seats were mostly empty, with only a few weary travelers scattered throughout the carriage. Gerald chose a seat near the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the landscape as the train sped through the night. He sank into the worn cushion, his body aching from the long journey. As the train began to move, Gerald felt a strange sensation, as if the train was pulling him further away from his past and into an uncertain future. The landscape outside the window morphed into a blur of darkness, punctuated by the occasional flash of a distant light. The rhythmic rocking of the train lulled Gerald into a restless sleep, his dreams haunted by memories of his old life and the hope of what lay ahead. Gerald was jolted awake by the sound of a woman sobbing. He rubbed his eyes, trying to adjust to the darkness. The train seemed to have taken on a more sinister atmosphere, the shadows on the walls appearing to twist and contort into grotesque shapes. The sobbing continued, its mournful sound echoing through the carriage. He scanned the compartment, searching for the source of the crying. It was then that he noticed her. A young woman with long, dark hair was huddled in the corner, her body racked with sobs. Gerald hesitated, unsure of whether to approach her. But something about her anguish compelled him to move closer, his heart aching with empathy. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up, her tear-streaked face revealing a mixture of sadness and fear. "I don't know where I am," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't remember how I got on this train." Gerald frowned, concern filling his chest. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Laura," she replied, her voice barely audible. Gerald did his best to comfort her, trying to piece together her story, but the more they talked, the more questions arose. Laura couldn't recall anything about her life before waking up on the train, her memories shrouded in darkness. It was as if her past had been erased, leaving her adrift in a sea of confusion and fear. As they spoke, the train continued its journey, its wheels clattering against the tracks in an unending rhythm. Gerald couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows on the walls taking on a life of their own. The other passengers appeared to be oblivious to the strange events unfolding around them, lost in their own thoughts or fast asleep. Determined to help Laura, Gerald suggested that they search the train for answers. Perhaps there was a conductor or another passenger who could provide some insight into her situation. Together they ventured through the narrow corridors, the train's eerie atmosphere growing more oppressive with each step. As they moved from carriage to carriage, they discovered that the train seemed to have no end. Each compartment appeared to be a mirror image of the one before it, filled with the same weary travelers in dimly lit seats. Gerald's unease grew with each passing moment, the feeling that they were trapped in a never-ending nightmare becoming more palpable. Eventually, they stumbled upon an old man hunched over in his seat, his eyes filled with a strange, haunted expression. Gerald hesitated, but Laura urged him to speak with the man, desperate for any information that could help her. Reluctantly, Gerald approached the old man and asked if he knew anything about Laura or the train they were on. The man looked up, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "This train, it's cursed," he whispered, his voice shaking. "It's a vessel for lost souls, those who can't escape their past." Gerald's heart skipped a beat, his mind racing with questions. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a barely audible level. "This train exists between worlds, a place where the living and the dead are trapped in an eternal loop. Those who board it are bound to it forever, their souls lost to the darkness." Gerald felt a chill run down his spine, his heart pounding in his chest. "How do we escape?" he asked, his voice filled with desperation. The old man shook his head sadly. "There is no escape, not for those who are bound to the train. The only way to break the curse is to confront the darkness within yourself, to face the demons of your past and find a way to move forward." Gerald looked at Laura, her face pale and full of fear. He knew that they had to try, that they couldn't give up without a fight. Together they made their way back to their seats, their minds racing with thoughts of the past and the challenges that lay ahead. As the train continued its journey, Gerald and Laura shared their stories, their hearts aching with the weight of their burdens. They spoke of their regrets, their hopes and their dreams, the words spilling forth like a torrent of emotion. And with each confession, the shadows in the carriage seemed to recede, the darkness giving way to a faint glimmer of light. As the hours passed, they began to feel a strange sense of hope, a belief that they could overcome the curse and find a way to escape the train. But they knew that the journey was far from over, that they would have to face the darkest parts of themselves in order to truly break free. The train raced through the night, the landscape outside the window an ever-changing tapestry of darkness and light. Gerald and Laura clung to each other, their hearts beating in unison as they faced the demons of their pasts. They delved deep into their memories, confronting the pain and the guilt that had haunted them for so long. For Gerald, it meant facing the reality of his father's abuse and his mother's suffering. He had to accept the fact that he couldn't change the past, but he could choose to let go of the anger and resentment that had consumed him for years. He could choose to forgive, not for his father's sake, but for his own. For Laura, it meant piecing together the fragments of her lost memories, rediscovering the life she had left behind. She had to confront the fear that had caused her to flee, the love she had lost, and the heartache that had driven her into the shadows of the midnight train. Together, they fought their way through the darkness, their souls slowly healing from the wounds of their past. And as they did, the train began to change. The shadows receded, the oppressive atmosphere lifting like a veil. The other passengers stirred from their slumber, their eyes filled with a newfound sense of hope and purpose. Finally, the train pulled into a station, the first they had seen since boarding the cursed vessel. The moon was shining brightly, its silver light casting a cool glow on the platform. The clock on the station wall showed the time, just a few minutes past midnight. Time had seemingly stood still during their journey through the darkness. Gerald and Laura exchanged a knowing glance, the bond they had formed during their ordeal stronger than they could have ever imagined. They gathered their belongings and stepped off the train, their hearts filled with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. As they walked away from the platform, they looked back at the train, its once sinister presence now a symbol of hope and redemption. They knew that they had faced their demons and emerged victorious, their souls no longer bound to the midnight train. With their pasts behind them, Gerald and Laura stepped into the unknowns of a new day, ready to embrace the future and all the challenges it might bring. They had been given a second chance, a rare opportunity to rewrite their destinies and rediscover the power of love, hope, and forgiveness. The midnight train, now a vessel of redemption, disappeared into the distance, its whistle echoing through the dawn, a reminder of the journey that had changed their lives forever.